My mother evicted me during Christmas dinner. No hesitation, no debate. Simply a sharp order cutting through the chatter and forced cheer. One moment I was serving the turkey. The next she was demanding I quit leeching off the family, ignoring that I secretly funded the very roof over their heads. The table fell silent. Nobody stood up for me. Not Dad, not my siblings. And in that quiet, something shifted within me, not rage, but realization. Since they insisted I depended on them, they were about to discover exactly how incorrect they were and the price of that error. Before we start, hit subscribe, like, and tell me, where are you watching Revenge Story podcast from? I didn't exit the dining room immediately. I remained seated for a beat, allowing the glow of the chandelier to bathe me. The same soft light that comforted me as a child before. I recognized the shadows it cast. To the outside world, our household appears to be the epitome of festive perfection: roasted turkey, sparkling ornaments, and laughter that feel genuine if you don't listen too intently. But when you are raised within this structure, you memorize every chip in the veneer, every fluctuation in pitch, and every pause that carries more weight than the sentence preceding it. My name is Veronica. I am 42. And for the majority of my existence, I was convinced that if I labored tirelessly, if I was present constantly, if I validated my worth repeatedly, I would secure a seat at this table that wasn't probationary. In my career, I direct operations, budgets, and mergers. Yet here, I remain the daughter who is overly autonomous, the sibling who is overly prosperous, the kin who is both essential and resented. My mother, Brenda, has forever controlled the emotional climate of our home. When she is sunny, we bask. When she is frigid, we freeze. Today, she was glacial. My father, David, focused on his meal, pushing peas around his china as if building a barricade. Mark, my eldest brother, feigned fascination with his device, although the display was dark. And Jason, the baby of the family, smirked into his goblet, part entertained, part vindicated, as if he had anticipated this dethroning for decades. It wasn't a secret that they all profited from my labor quietly, perpetually. When Mark faced litigation issues, he dialed my number. When Jason couldn't meet the tuition for his son Leo, I covered it. When my parents' expenses climbed too high, I settled them silently. I did so because I thought kinship meant elevation. I did so because I refused to watch them struggle. However, primarily, I did so hoping it would confirm I was one of them, even when reality suggested otherwise. Throughout my youth, Brenda often claimed, "Resilient women bear the family burden alone." AITA failed to grasp she was referring
to exactly one female.
And that person was me. She never instructed my brothers on carrying obligations. She trained them to delegate, and they complied, time and again. Meanwhile, I convinced myself this was affection. But as I sat there processing the resonance of her command, "Quit leeching off the family," I felt my internal logic reconfigure. The equation was flawed, and perhaps it always had been. I drank from my glass, letting the cool water wash away the bitterness. Around me, dialogue resumed in jagged, unnatural rhythms, as if everyone was eager to act like the event hadn't occurred. Yet it had, and it was permanent. And as I observed them dodging my gaze, I understood this wasn't the start of a breakdown. It was the start of an awakening. The remainder of the meal felt like anticipating a hurricane that everyone refused to name. You could detect it in the rapid clatter of silverware, in the way my father's breath caught whenever my mother adjusted her napkin, in the way Jason's leg jittered beneath the tablecloth like he was watching a private comedy. I held my tongue, not from intimidation, but because quiet observation reveals true character. Brenda chatted as if the air was clear. She critiqued the seasoning of the bird, the warmth of the bread, the neighbor's renovation. She never once acknowledged me. That was her method. She didn't detonate, she deleted. And being deleted by your creator stings worse than any slur. Eventually, Mark broke the seal. "Mom is correct, Ronnie," he mumbled, staring at his fork. "You have been remote. Perhaps this is necessary." Remote, a term people utilize when they have erased the previous dozen times you rescued them. I offered no reply. I simply watched him squirm, my lack of words deafening compared to any defense I could have mounted. Then Jason added his piece, swirling his drink theatrically. "If you are drowning, admit it. There is no disgrace in needing support from them." I nearly chuckled, but before I could speak, Brenda interrupted, her tone velvet-wrapped steel. "Veronica, darling, we cannot continue pretending reality is perfect. You depend excessively on this unit. It is time you matured." There it lay, the absolute boundary, the sentence that would fracture everything. Quit leeching off the family. She had voiced it prior, but now she enunciated it purposefully, as if etching the phrase into my skin. And the cruelest part wasn't the insult. It was how the other let it settle. Nobody objected. Nobody pleaded for peace. Their mute acceptance wasn't bafflement. It was consent. That was the instant my perspective rotated, not snapped. A snap implies disorder. This was wisdom locking into position like a bolt sliding home. I pardoned myself to the restroom, not to weep, but to inhale. The mirror showed a stranger, not due to age or exhaustion, but because she finally grasped the facts. I wasn't being exiled from the clan. I had never truly been admitted. When I returned to the dining area, they barely reacted. My chair dragged against the hardwood, yet no heads turned. Not even Brenda's, that was my signal. I gathered my jacket, folding it over my arm. Brenda finally peered at me, not with concern, but irritation, as if I were disrupting her scene.
"Where are you headed?"
she queried. I held her gaze tranquil and firm. Away. For a heartbeat, something passed behind her eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps alarm before she masked it.
Nobody blocked me as I moved towards the exit.
They didn't comprehend yet, but they would soon. The winter breeze greeted me with a purity the dining room lacked. I marched to my vehicle without a backward glance, not from arrogance, but because I didn't trust myself to grant them one last look. They hadn't merited that. My fingers were steady as I started the engine, steadier than they had been in decades. By the time I arrived at my condo in the metro, the shock had faded, superseded by a calm, cutting determination. The type born not of fury, but of finally accepting the reality. I entered, secured the deadbolt, and allowed the stillness to accumulate. My apartment had always been my sanctuary, but tonight it felt distinct. It felt like it was expecting a verdict. I shed no tears. I shouted no curses. I went to my closet, retrieved a traveler's bag, and commenced packing. Not to travel, just to signify the conclusion. Folding garments became a ritual. Every blouse, every pair of slacks felt like a boundary erected. The zipper's soft buzz was proof I retained command, at least over my own life. I packed with a steady, methodical tempo. No haste, no anxiety, just focus. I booted up my computer, the screen's glow bathing the room in clinical blue. Systematically, I loaded the portals I had avoided scrutinizing. Transfers for my parents' electricity, invoices for the lake house, tuition assistance, silent donations I had provided for years without seeking praise. Viewing the figures aggregated in one location was like watching a biography unfurl in digits, cold, stark, irrefutable. I hovered the cursor over the recurring transfers. Then I terminated them, not out of malice, but out of logic. They had demanded I quit leeching, so I complied. Right there, in the most literal, actionable sense imaginable. The lake house upkeep was next. The heating, the water, the broadband services I subsidized despite never being welcomed for weekends. A retreat they claimed as theirs while I funded the overhead. My mouse clicked through every service, severing what should never have. Started, terminate, 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 every confirmation message. Felt like a breath I had suppressed for ages. But the ultimate validation arrived when I accessed a directory I hadn't opened in years. The deed arrangements for the lake house transfer. My attorney had demanded a forfeiture provision. Back then I consented because it seemed wise. Now it seemed destined. Should the title ever be challenged? Should my parents try to banish me from choices? Or if they violated the stipulations? Ownership instantly reverted to me. No litigation, no arbitration, just a direct legal outcome. I reclined in my seat, letting the gravity land. They believed they possessed the leverage. They believed I was the dependent one, but the reality had always been inverted. I shut the computer, plunging the room into shadow save for the skyline beyond. This wasn't vengeance. Not yet, it was housekeeping. Because the second they understood what my absence actually signified, everything would rotate and I would be prepared. 3 days elapsed before my mobile buzzed. Not with worry, not with contrition, but with audacity. Jason's ID lit up the display. I allowed it to ring twice, ensuring he felt the hesitation. "Ronnie, what on earth did you do?" he shouted, bypassing any facade of politeness. "The house is freezing, the furnace is dead, and the Wi-Fi is dark. Leo was scheduled to visit this Friday. Now he is stuck here," I stated flatly. "What is your malfunction?" His tone fractured with incredulity, as if I had broken a sacred vow to subsidize him eternally. "I ceased paying for the assets I do not utilize," I answered. The line went silent, thick, resentful, baffled. Then he erupted into a sermon about blood loyalty, duty, giving. Strange how people deploy those terms only when they require something from you. I let him vent, then offered only this. You demanded I stop relying on the family. So I did. And then I disconnected. The subsequent call wasn't from Jason. It wasn't from Mark. It came from my father. A hushed, nervous message asking if we could discuss matters like grown-ups. The pitch was recognizable, desperate, yet masquerading as rational. They weren't concerned for me. They were concerned about the price of my vacancy. 2 additional days passed before the escalation. A thick packet arrived in my post. Formal seal, return address from a downtown firm, containing a motion filed by my mother. She was petitioning the court to annul the Lake House transfer, alleging she had been under duress and misunderstood the clauses, demanding the asset returned to her and David. I stood at my counter reviewing the pages in a quiet so absolute it hummed. They hadn't even telephoned first. They moved directly to seizing what wasn't theirs, not by error or misunderstanding, but by intent. That was the end. The instant the gray area vanished, I phoned my counsel that afternoon. He reviewed the filings, sighed audibly, and shook his head. They have 0 standing. The forfeiture provision guarantees title returns to you automatically. You didn't lose the house because of me. You lost it because you attempted to steal what wasn't yours. My mother's expression locked. And for the first time she looked terrified. Her mask went blank, hollow, like someone had snatched the script and left her mute on stage. My father recoiled, shocked. Mark studied his palms. Jason's jaw unhinged, then shut silently. They weren't just stunned. They were exposed. I allowed the quiet to linger until the gravity sank in. And then I spoke gently. I'm not doing this for retribution. I am doing this because I should have established limits 20 years ago. You claimed I depended on you, but you were the ones depending on me. And now you must depend on yourselves. My mother located her voice. We are your blood. I know. I loved you like family. I funded you like family. But you didn't treat me like one. I rose, adjusting my jacket. From my purse, I extracted a $1 bill, the symbolic legacy reflecting how they viewed my sacrifices trivial, dismissible, cheap. I placed it in the middle of the table. This is what is left, I said. Everything else I already donated, and you never even noticed. Nobody stirred. Not Dad, not my brothers, not Brenda, whose vacant gaze flickered into something resembling regret far too late. I backed away from the table. Veronica! My mother called, her voice fracturing. I hesitated just enough to register it, but I didn't rotate. Some narratives require a final sentence. This one required an exit. The door chime sounded as I stepped into the biting wind, and for the first time I felt no guilt for departing. I felt liberated. In the ensuing days, the silence transformed. It wasn't the silence of rejection. It was the peace you acquire after speaking the truth. My condo felt more luminous. The dawn light striped the counters in gold, and for the first time in ages, I didn't wake up anticipating another person's emergency. My lawyer ratified the deed. The property was solely mine. No argument, no loophole, just a clean transfer triggered by their greed. He asked if I desired to seek damages. I declined. Justice doesn't need to be noisy to be valid. And a week later, my father emailed. No scriptures. No manipulation, just a sentence stating they were managing. I hope they were. Perhaps losing the crutch they took for granted would compel them to evolve in ways they never had to. As for me, I strolled along the riverbank that Sunday, letting the chill sting my face. I felt weightless, not because I had won, but because I had finally dropped a burden I was never designed to haul. I hadn't deserted my family. I had simply stopped deserting myself. Eventually, they might grasp why I drew the line. Maybe they won't. But I have realized that boundaries are not penalties. They are requests for people to treat you with the dignity you have always offered them. And if they cannot, you proceed regardless. My existence is quieter now, firmer, finally mine. If this story echoes something in your life, share your thoughts below. And if you want more true family dramas and endings that finally make sense, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter.